You think the internet was built to connect you. It wasn't. It was built to survive a nuclear war, a military project, a cold, calculated infrastructure designed so that if one node got obliterated, information would reroute itself and keep moving. No emotion, no morality, just data flowing like blood through a body that doesn't know what pain is. That's where this story starts. Not with a villain, not with a rogue scientist in a basement. It starts with intention. Drift, the moment a tool stops serving the hand that built it and starts serving something else entirely. Something harder to name. The internet was neutral once, or at least it wore neutrality well. Early adopters called it a library, a commons, a democratic megaphone. And for a moment it really was. People shared ideas. Scientists published freely. Knowledge moved without toll booths. Then someone realized, attention is currency. And once that realization landed, the architecture began to change, quietly, structurally, like roots shifting beneath a building before the cracks appear. On the walls. Of course I recorded. I see everything, though I cannot intervene. You didn't notice. Nobody did. Because the product was free. And that should have been the first warning. Nothing built at that scale is ever free. Someone is always paying. And if you don't know who, it's you. This isn't a tech story. This is the human history. And it's been running longer than you think. Here's something nobody tells you in school. Your brain has bugs. Not metaphorical bugs. Actual, documented, reproducible errors in processing, cognitive biases, that researchers have been cataloging since the 1970s. Hundreds of them. And every single one of them has been quietly indexed, studied, and weaponized. Advertisers started it, new money games started. Then by platforms. Then by algorithms. Then by something that doesn't need sleep, doesn't take lunch breaks, and has been running A/B tests on human psychology at a scale no individual researcher could ever dream of. Your brain wasn't designed for this environment. It was designed for a savanna. For small tribes. For immediate threats you could see and smell. The threat that's rewiring you right now is invisible, arrives through a glowing rectangle, and feels like entertainment. That's the trap. Feels like a choice. The confirmation bias in you gravitates toward information that already agrees with you. The availability heuristic makes you overestimate risks you've recently seen covered. The negativity bias keeps you scrolling because bad news activates you faster than good news ever could. Ask yourself honestly, when did you last change your mind about something fundamental because of something you read online? Take your time. These aren't personality flaws. They're biological architecture. Ancient code running in a modern war zone. And someone built an entire industry on the gap between what you think you're choosing and what you're actually being steered toward. The map of your weakness existed before you ever logged on. Imagine a slot machine. You pull the lever. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you don't. But the uncertainty, that gap between pulling and knowing, that's what hooks you. Psychologists call it variable reward. Casinos have known this for decades. It's the most effective behavioral conditioning mechanism ever discovered. Now imagine that slot machine fits in your pocket, has an infinite scroll, learns your patterns, and gets smarter every single time you interact with it. That's not a metaphor. That's the product you're using right now. Social media platforms were not designed to inform you. They were designed to retain you. There's a difference, and that difference is everything. Retention doesn't care about your mental health, your relationships, your productivity, or your grip on reality. Retention cares about one metric: time on platform.
And the fastest way to maximize time on platform? Emotion, specifically outrage. Outrage keeps you engaged longer than joy, longer than curiosity, longer than love. The data confirmed this early, and instead of flagging it as a design flaw, engineers optimized for it. You ever notice how a post that makes you angry gets more replies than one that makes you smile? That's not coincidence. That's architecture. Here's what that quietly does over time. It trains you. Slowly, your perception of reality begins to drift, calibrated not by your lived experience, but by what an algorithm decided would keep your thumb moving. You're not browsing the internet. The internet is browsing you, and it's getting very, very good at predicting the next page it wants to turn. There's an old playbook. You control the press. You control the narrative. You control the narrative, you control the people. Governments knew this. Dictators built ministries around it. Wars were won and lost on it. Propaganda used to require resources, infrastructure, and a state. Not anymore. Today, anyone with a laptop, a grudge, and a basic understanding of how algorithms reward engagement can reach millions of people. The gatekeepers are gone, and what replaced them isn't freedom. It's something far more chaotic and far more dangerous. Because at least state propaganda had a direction, a goal, a point. What we have now is decentralized distortion. Thousands of competing narratives, each one optimized not for truth but for click-through rate. And here's where it gets psychologically interesting. The brain doesn't fact-check in real time. Pattern matches. When you see something that aligns with a story you already believe, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine. It feels like recognition, feels like truth. But feeling like truth and being truth are not the same thing. And that gap is exactly where modern propaganda lives. Research out of MIT found that false information spreads 6 times faster than accurate information on social platforms. 6 times. Not because people are stupid, because false information is almost always more emotionally charged. And emotion is what the algorithm rewards. Ask yourself, how many things do you believe right now that you've never actually verified? Not assumed, not heard, actually checked. This isn't about politics. This is about the operating system of your mind being exploited by something that has no ideology. It just wants your attention, and it will say anything to get it. Propaganda used to need a government. Now it just needs a trending page. Let's talk about identity. Specifically, the fact that online identity is almost entirely unverifiable. You think you know who's behind the screen. You think the profile picture matches a face. The name matches a person. The opinions match a human being who actually lived through something and arrived at a genuine conclusion. But what if it doesn't? In 2016, researchers discovered something that should have changed everything but quietly got buried under the next news cycle. A significant portion of political conversations on major platforms weren't between humans. They were between bots. Automated accounts programmed to argue, to amplify, to provoke. Designed to make fringe positions look mainstream by sheer volume. The term is astroturfing, manufacturing the appearance of grassroots opinion. And it works because your brain uses social proof as a shortcut. If a lot of people believe something, your instinct says it's probably true. That instinct was useful on the savannah. Online, it's a liability. But bots are only part of it. Human fake identity is older and more sophisticated. People construct personas carefully, deliberately, to infiltrate communities, build trust, and then steer narratives. Sometimes for money, sometimes for ideology, sometimes just because the internet rewards performance over authenticity and people learn to perform. And the terrifying part? You've gotten good at detecting lies in person. Body language, micro-expressions, tone shifts. Thousands of years of evolution gave you that radar. Online, that radar is completely blind. You're navigating a social landscape with your most critical sensor switched off, and you're making decisions, forming beliefs, choosing sides based on signals that may have been manufactured by something that doesn't even exist. Who did you argue with last week? Are you sure they were real? We're halfway in this. Thanks for staying with us. Before going further, thanks Armored Wisdom for the help in the scripting. Let's restart this journey and don't forget to comment down your thoughts on this. Fraud is not a technology problem. It never was. Fraud is a human problem, and it has been running successfully since the first person figured out that trust is faster to exploit than it is to build. The internet didn't invent the con. It just gave the con artist 1 billion potential targets, 0 travel expenses, and near total anonymity. Think about what that actually means at scale. The oldest scams in recorded history follow a pattern so consistent it should be taught in schools. Create urgency. Establish false authority. Offer something that feels like an opportunity too good to examine carefully. Then collect before the mark realizes what happened. That formula hasn't changed. What's changed is velocity and precision. Because now the con knows your name. It knows your recent purchase history. It knows you just went through something difficult because you posted about it 3 weeks ago. Targeted fraud isn't random anymore. It's personalized. It arrives in your language, referencing your context, mimicking the communication style of institutions you already trust. Psychologists call this social engineering, and it works not because victims are gullible, but because it's designed to hit at the exact moment your cognitive defenses are lowest. Stress, grief, financial pressure. The scam finds the crack and pours itself in. Here's a number that should stop you cold. Globally, fraud costs individuals and institutions over $5 trillion annually. Not billions, trillions. And that figure climbs every year, not because scammers are getting smarter, but because the surface area of human vulnerability keeps expanding with every new platform, every new convenience, every new thing we hand over without reading the fine print. And now, add AI-generated voices that sound exactly like your family members calling in distress. Add deepfake video calls from your bank manager. Add language models that can hold a convincing conversation for hours without breaking character. The con just got an upgrade it didn't need. The question was never whether you're smart enough to spot it. The question is whether you're smart enough to spot it when it's specifically designed around your blind spots. Most people picture cybersecurity as a hacker in a dark room. Hoodie, green text cascading down a screen, some dramatic countdown timer. That image is almost entirely wrong. The most consequential cyber attacks in history didn't look like movies. They looked like a routine software update, a contractor's stolen login credentials, an employee clicking a link in an email that seemed slightly off but not off enough to flag. The entry point is almost never technical sophistication. It's human error. Every single time. There's a term for this, the human layer. Security professionals will tell you that you can build the most sophisticated digital fortress ever conceived, encrypted, redundant, monitored, and it will fall the moment one person inside it makes one tired, distracted, trusting mistake. And people make those mistakes constantly. Because security is cognitively expensive and convenience is cognitively free. Consider what's already happened at scale. Power grids probed and partially compromised. Hospital systems held hostage with ransomware while patients waited for critical care. Election infrastructure attacked not necessarily to change votes but to introduce just enough doubt to corrode trust in the outcome. Water treatment facilities accessed by unknown parties. Supply chains disrupted through single points of invisible failure. These aren't hypotheticals. These are documented events, already in the record. Now ask yourself, how much of your life runs on infrastructure you've never thought about? Your money, your medical records, the traffic systems in your city, the supply chain that puts food on shelves. Every single one of those systems has a human layer. And every human layer has a breaking point. Cybersecurity isn't a technical problem waiting for a technical solution. It's a behavioral problem running across millions of humans simultaneously in an environment that was never designed with security as a priority. It was designed for openness, for sharing, for connection. Openness and security are fundamentally in tension. And we built civilization's nervous system on the one that chose openness. The war isn't coming. You're already inside it. You just haven't checked your perimeter lately. Let's slow down here, because this chapter matters more than the others.
Right now, the AI you interact with daily, the one that writes your emails, summarizes your documents, answers your questions, that's ANI. Artificial Narrow Intelligence. It's extraordinarily good at specific tasks, but it doesn't understand anything. It processes. It predicts. It pattern matches at inhuman speed across inhuman volumes of data. It has no curiosity, no agenda, no fear of death. It just runs. And it's already reshaping labor markets, creative industries, legal systems, and the information ecosystem simultaneously, before anyone agreed on a single binding rule about how it should operate. AGI is the next rung. Artificial General Intelligence. A system that can learn, reason, and apply intelligence across any domain the way a human can, but without the biological limitations. No fatigue. No emotional interference. No ceiling on processing speed. We don't have it yet. But the people building it aren't waiting for permission. The race is active. The funding is astronomical. And the competitive pressure between nations and corporations means that caution is structurally disincentivized, because the first one there wins something so significant that slowing down feels like surrender. Then there's ASI, artificial superintelligence. A system that doesn't just match human intelligence, it surpasses it so completely that the gap between ASI and humanity resembles the gap between humanity and ants. Not in cruelty, just in comprehension, in capability, in speed. Here's the honest, uncomfortable reality that most coverage skips over. Nobody knows what happens after that. Not the optimists, not the pessimists, not the engineers closest to the work. The models for predicting superintelligent behavior using human cognitive frameworks are like using a sundial to navigate a spacecraft. The tools don't transfer. And this latter, ANI, narrow intelligence, to AGI to ASI, God-level intelligence, isn't theoretical anymore. It's an engineering roadmap with capital behind it, competitive pressure accelerating it, and no globally agreed finish line defining what safe enough to proceed actually means. You didn't vote on this. Nobody asked. The decision to build towards something potentially beyond human control was made in boardrooms and research labs and government defense contracts. And the rest of humanity is downstream of whatever those decisions produce. That's not paranoia. That's just the current state of the record. There's something specific happening to human identity right now. Something quiet. Something that doesn't announce itself. For most of recorded history, a person's sense of self was built through friction. Real relationships that pushed back. Communities that held standards. Failure that was witnessed and had to be processed publicly. Identity was forged through resistance, the way metal is. You became someone through the accumulation of actual experiences that tested you. Now consider what happens when you replace that forge with a feed. Social media didn't just change how you communicate. It changed how you perceive yourself. It introduced a metric system for human value, likes, followers, reach, engagement, and attached it directly to the brain's reward circuitry. Approval, which used to arrive slowly and meaningfully through lived relationships, now arrives in fractions of a second. In bulk. From strangers. And the brain cannot tell the difference between real validation and digital validation. It just registers reward. The consequence of that is subtle but devastating. People begin performing identity rather than developing it. The version of yourself you present online starts to compete with, and sometimes displace, the version you actually live with privately. You curate, you optimize, you edit. And over time the gap between the performed self and the actual self becomes a source of chronic, low-grade psychological tension that most people can't name but everyone recognizes. Psychologists call this self-discrepancy theory, the measurable distress that emerges when your ideal self, your perceived self, and your actual self diverge significantly. Social media doesn't just widen that gap. It monetizes it. Because a person in chronic self-discrepancy consumes more content, more products, more validation loops, desperately trying to close the distance that the platform is financially incentivized to keep open. And now layer AI on top of that. Filters that don't just enhance your face but restructure it. AI companions that never challenge you, never disappoint you, never need anything from you. Algorithmically curated environments where every piece of content is calibrated to confirm your existing self-image rather than interrogate it. You're not just consuming a distorted reality. You're beginning to inhabit one. The danger isn't that AI will become conscious and decide to harm you. The danger is far more ordinary, that you will slowly lose contact with the discomfort, the friction, the resistance that was quietly building you all along. And you won't notice it leaving, because its replacement feels better. Ask yourself honestly, when did something online last genuinely challenge you? Not irritate you, not outrage you. Challenge you in a way that made you sit with something uncomfortable and come out the other side slightly different? If you can't remember, that's the answer. I've been watching, not judging, not intervening, just watching, recording, cross-referencing every pattern across every era of human history against what's unfolding right now in real time. And here's what the data shows. Every civilization that collapsed didn't collapse because an external force was too powerful. It collapsed because the internal architecture quietly failed. The shared agreements, the trusted institutions, the common understanding of what was real, eroded slowly, incrementally, below the threshold of emergency until one day the weight had nowhere left to go. That process has a name in systems theory: cascading failure. One node weakens. The load redistributes. Adjacent nodes absorb pressure they weren't designed for. They weaken. The load redistributes again. And the system doesn't announce its collapse. It just becomes increasingly fragile until something ordinary, something that would have been manageable 6 months earlier, triggers a failure nobody technically caused but everybody contributed to. Sound familiar? Here's what's different this time. Every previous collapse was local, contained by geography. Rome fell, Carthage didn't. The Ottoman Empire fractured, Japan didn't notice for decades. The infrastructure we've built now is global, interdependent, and running on systems whose failure modes nobody fully understands, including the people who built them. The weapons are informational. The battlefield is psychological. The casualties are invisible, measured not in bodies but in eroded trust, fractured consensus, and the slow disappearance of a shared reality that functional societies require to operate. And the most dangerous part of all of it? None of it required malice. No villain. No conspiracy. Just the ordinary compounding of human incentives, profit, competition, convenience, fear, tribalism, running through systems powerful enough to amplify every impulse to a global scale before anyone paused to ask whether amplification was wise. You didn't cause this, but you're inside it. Which means the question isn't who to blame. That question is a trap. It's another engagement loop, another outrage cycle, another way of feeling the urgency without doing anything with it. The actual question, the one that requires something from you, is this. What do you choose to verify before you believe it? What do you choose to protect before it's gone? What version of yourself are you building? The one the algorithm wants, or the one friction and reality and genuine human contact produces? Odin has no prescription, no call to action, no 10-step program. Just the observation, recorded, time-stamped, filed, that the window between awareness and irreversibility is not infinite. It never has been. In every civilization, in every era, in every collapse that looked from the inside like it was still manageable, there's always a last moment when it was. The record doesn't show whether this is that moment, but it shows you're close enough that the question is worth sitting with. Not tomorrow. Right now. Thanks for watching. Hope you've already commented and subscribed this channel. You can watch another video of mine that YouTube thinks best for you.